Hello everybody, welcome to the I Am IT Geek YouTube channel. My name is Shabaz Dan. As ever, I am the IT Geek. Welcome to the SC300 Microsoft Exam Prep series. We are well deep into Module 2 now of this series. Module 1 was all last week, going around the Zero AD and authentication methods, and we touched on just users and groups and security groups, etc. So far in Module 2 we've looked at MFA settings and self-service password reset. We're now getting into managing user authentication, but before we crack on with the episode, it would be remiss of me not to say hello to my partner in crime, Dwayne. Hi Dwayne.
Hey Shabaz. Hey everybody. Welcome back.
Yes, and how are you, sir?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm slowly melting, if I'm honest with you. It's very hot. You can see I've got with my pointing, I've got my fan there. I've got my blinds down to try and keep the heat out. It's not working. My headphones are it sounds awful. My headphones are very sliding all. I won't go into too much detail, don't want to upset any viewers. But yeah, we're well into Module 2 now, so I will get started with the episode. So again, you know who me and Dwayne are by now. I did a quick introduction at the beginning of this module, and I will at the Module 3 as well, just to recap. There's me looking scared of the cloud. We are in Module 2, which is Implement an Authentication and Access Management Solution. So let's just touch on what you have in store for you this episode. So yes, we are looking at planning and implementing and managing a user authentication. So this is part 1. There's 2 parts to this. 3 parts to this, I apologize, 3 parts to this. So first of all, we're going to talk about planning for authentication, very high level. We'll look at administering some authentication methods, i.e. mainly passwordless. And then I will hand over to Dwayne, who's going to show us how you can configure passwordless authentication in Azure AD. Okay, so let's talk about planning for authentication. So you need to ensure you have the most relevant subscription. There are so many different subscriptions available. When it comes to authentication, you don't have as many. You have, well, 2 paid for subscriptions. You have the free version, but also you have Azure AD Premium 1 and Azure AD Premium 2. So again, depending on what sort of authentication methods and what sort of features you want to use, it will very much drive which subscription you use. Okay, is that Azure AD Premium 1 or Premium 2, or do you actually want to use Enterprise Mobility and Security as well? That's another option. It's more of a package as well. What type of environment do you have? Because that's gonna drive, your planning for authentication as well. Are you cloud only? Are you cloud native only? Are you brave and you've moved away from on-premises totally? Or are you in the middle? Do you sit on the fence? Do you stay hybrid? Choose an authentication method that suits your needs, your organization, your security policies, and make sure you choose more than one, but make sure it fits your needs as well. It might end up being SMS and phone. Me and Dwayne have slagged off phone and SMS quite a bit, but rightfully so. But if that suits your organisation, then they're there. Use them. And finally, when you're planning for authentication, decide on that additional authentication. Don't just stick with your primary, then have a backup sort of authentication method as well. What if someone's phone gets stolen using, or they've lost their phone? Or one I had recently is I swapped phones. So if anyone who's tried to migrate their authenticator stuff to a new phone, it's absolute nightmare. Good job on that, Microsoft. It's absolute nightmare.
That is the worst. The worst is when you change phones and you find out you'll find out what applications you had MFA on really quick.
Exactly. So if you're in that predicament, have a second additional authentication method, be it text or whatever, just so you can get through and at least helps you get that sorted.
And that creates another point around that planning around authentication methods is how make it think about your users and think about the user experience when you're in your planning, and think about the change management and communicate that with your users as well, especially if you're going to implement multi-factor authentication. I don't mind multi-factor authentication at all. What I do mind is a convoluted experience around how you have to use MFA. If you have to put a username and a password and a a security token from your app all in place to log in, that becomes a very complex authentication method, and users are going to complain, and so you're going to get complaints from the users. Use push notifications wherever you can, so that all they have to do is log into their phone and say yes. Is always a good way to go, because if there's any complaints that I hear most, it's difficult MFA setups, and I hear from my wife every time she logs into her school's systems, because they made it a very difficult process where they're using email codes.
Oh wow! One thing I'll say is, again, I like to joke, and I'm not sure if others do, about users. They cause a lot of problems, or I like to call users muggles for those Harry Potter fans. But they are so important in this aspect, because the experience they have with MFA will very much drive the buy-in to MFA from the organisation. If they're not happy, they're going to complain. The your management team are going to get complaints about MFA, and it's going to drive the organisation to move away from MFA, which is a worst case nightmare scenario.
Or drive people to shadow IT.
Oh god, that's even worse. I didn't even think about that.
Which gets even worse. Yes, exactly.
Oh,
I'm not going to use Microsoft 365 anymore. I'm going to use Google and.
Right, don't even joke about that, Dwayne. Oh, that's like DEFCON 1 is that, I think. Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about administering authentication methods, specifically passwordless. So some of the prerequisites for this authentication method: it needs to be Windows 10 version 15.11 or later, or even Windows 11 for those people who have migrated to that. You obviously need to have an Azure account, otherwise you're not going to be able to really use it. It's kind of important. So make sure you have a valid Azure account. And that'll obviously mean that you have an Azure AD subscription as well. Okay, so without those two things, we might as well not be talking right now. Moving on, make sure you have Azure MFA as well. So that needs to be enabled on your Azure AD account for you to be able to utilize passwordless as an authentication method. And we touched on licensing earlier. Make sure you have an Azure AD Premium subscription, because that is passwordless authentication is a feature of the premium subscriptions. Okay, and this is actually optional, but using MDM of some sort, Intune being the primary one. So again, that's optional, but you can use Intune when you're administering passwordless authentication method. So being a bit of a small, not a lot to talk about and go through, this is one of those topics where I think seeing for yourself is really the best way. So I'm going to hand over to you, Dwayne, to walk us through the demo.
Yeah, and something to point out there too. People might be asking, well, we're going passwordless. Why do what is MFA? What is MFA, and how does that pertain to passwordless? Mm-hmm. So and I know we'll talk more about Windows Hello, but even if you think about when you set up your phone, set up your smartphone for biometrics, whether it's fingerprint or whether it's facial recognition, you're still utilizing a PIN code, a PIN for that access. Same thing with if you're set up for facial recognition for Windows and using Windows Hello, you're utilizing a PIN, and you're setting up a PIN that's going into the BIOS of the system. So that's going into the BIOS, not in the operating system. So it's encrypted behind BitLocker on your Windows laptop. So you're passwordless because you're not typing in a password anymore. You're using your biometrics to very easily log in, but that's verifying your facial recognition against the encrypted PIN code as well. So to be compromised, somebody's going to have your face or your fingerprint as well as your PIN code to be able to authenticate. So it's still utilizing MFA, and still why it's such a secure means to authenticate, because like everybody knows, you know, people can generally guess your kids' birthdays, or your wife's your anniversary and things like that. But generally, a PIN code, we've been using PIN codes for years for ATMs, right? A random 4 to 6 digit number is going to be much more secure than like I said, your dog's name that people can guess. So let's talk about how we do set up passwordless. And that is, again, we're in Azure Active Directory. We've scrolled down in below the Manage section to Security, and we're going to go again into our authentication methods here. And we have our different authentication methods in here. So we look at Microsoft Authenticator, which is generally my favorite. I know a lot of people are starting to move to and talk about FIDO 2 and using FIDO authentication. Still, everybody always has their smartphone with them for the most part. So why not use the Authenticator app? It's very helpful. And then so you go in here. We've got enabling. We've got use for sign-in, use for strong authentication. We use select users. And if we go to configure here, we can see the authentication methods, whether we're going to use push, passwordless, or any. And we can set that up as Microsoft managed here, and or we can disable it if we want as well, and select done and save, and then we have that set up with those particular users, and we can see the users, and we can see the registration in here. We can add additional users if we want, and then or we can remove users as well. And it's pretty much that simple if they're enforced users, and these are really my only 2 MFA enforced users. But keep in mind there's some limitations around passwordless if you're using if you're using multiple tenants on the Authenticator app. Like if for instance I've got this Captain Hyperscaler account, but I've also got my company on the Authenticator app. There's some limitations if they're both utilizing some of those passwordless features of having more than one account. Now, I believe, like we said in the previous video, this is being recorded in August 2022. I believe as part of some of the integrations that they're doing in September, that's going to open up. It's not necessarily something you need to know for the exam, but more so something just a good understanding that if you're using multiple business level accounts on your Authenticator app, there's some limitations for passwordless. I use passwordless myself on my personal account. I love it because I don't have to put a password in anymore, and so nobody's going to steal my account, because as long as I have my phone with me, they can't get into my personal business. So big proponent of getting rid of passwords and not using them anymore. I think that's it for this particular section demo.
Thank you again. Thanks again, Dwayne, and thanks for clearing up the whole piece about passwordless to start with. So a lot of valid information there, important information for this topic. So yeah, we're covering a lot of ground in these episodes. We're trying to make it not too complicated, and trying to get our points across. And again, let us know what you think. Are you happy with the format? We're trying to mix it with theory and demos and labs to keep it interesting. And we're trying to mix it between me and Dwayne, so you don't hear just my dulcet tones the whole way through the episodes. But do give us. We always appreciate feedback. We appreciate people being constructive. So please do let us know in the comments. Please do like and make sure you subscribe to keep up to date with what we're doing. All our socials are in the description. Also a link, the most important thing, a link to Dwayne's SC300 book that he authored earlier this year. Buy it, follow it as you go along in the series, and also we've put a link into the GitHub Microsoft Labs as well, so you can follow the labs with Dwayne as we go through. So Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And up until next time, thank you and goodbye.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.